She fell to the ground, humiliated and alone. But when she lifted her eyes and spoke a single sentence to her horse, everyone felt their hearts freeze. The Texas dust clung to Emma Ramirez's skin as she walked the worn path toward Bellamy Ranch. Autumn sun beat down on her shoulders, unforgiving despite the calendar's promise of cooler days. Her backpack, faded blue with fraying straps, held everything she owned: 2 changes of clothes, a dog-eared photo of her grandmother, and the small wooden horse Abuela Consuelo had carved for her 12th birthday. 22 years of life, reduced to a single backpack. Emma adjusted the strap digging into her shoulder and squinted at the ranch silhouette on the horizon. The place looked exactly as the women at the employment office had described: sprawling, imposing, a kingdom of wealth rising from the dusty nothing of West Texas. "Remember what Abuela taught you," Emma whispered to herself in Spanish, the language she reserved for her most private thoughts. Head high, eyes clear, spirit strong. 3 months had passed since she'd buried Consuelo. 3 months of desperate calculations, of stretching the meager savings, of realizing that without her grandmother's Social Security checks, the trailer park manager would show no mercy. When the cleaning job at Bellamy Ranch appeared at the employment office, Emma had grabbed it like a lifeline, despite the warnings about Richard Bellamy's reputation. The ranch entrance loomed before her now, an elaborate iron gate bearing the Bellamy brand, flanked by stone pillars. Beyond it stretched a manicured driveway lined with drought-resistant ornamental grasses that someone was paid to keep perfectly trimmed. Emma had grown up watching the Bellamy wealth from afar, like most Mexican-American kids in Marfa. His kind owned the land, her kind worked it. A security guard eyed her approach with bored suspicion. "I'm the new cleaning staff," Emma said, presenting the crumpled job offer letter. "Emma Ramirez." He barely glanced at the paper. "Staff entrance is around back." Of course it was. 20 minutes later, Emma stood in Richard Bellamy's study, trying not to flinch under his appraising gaze. At 60, Bellamy retained the broad shoulders and commanding presence that had intimidated oil competitors and land sellers for decades. His silver hair was expensively cut, his rancher's tan stopping precisely at his collar line. "So you're Consuelo's granddaughter," he said, rifling through a folder without looking at her. "I remember the old woman, stubborn as they come." Emma bit the inside of her cheek. "Yes, sir. Maria in the kitchen vouched for you. Said you're a hard worker." He finally looked up, his eyes the cold blue of distant winter. "I'm paying you $8 an hour, which is generous considering you have no experience and—" His eyes flicked over her features. "No papers I need to concern myself with." Emma felt her jaw tighten. She had been born in Marfa, as American as Bellamy himself, but she'd long stopped correcting assumptions. "I have all the necessary documentation, Mr. Bellamy." A flicker of irritation crossed his face at the correction. "Maria will show you your quarters and duties. You start immediately." He waved his hand in dismissal. "You're cheap labor, girl. Don't forget it." Maria Gonzalez, the ranch's cook for 15 years, showed Emma to a small room in the staff quarters, a converted storage space with a narrow bed, dresser, and window barely wider than her shoulders. "It's not much," Maria admitted in Spanish, her round face creased with sympathy. "But it's clean. I put fresh sheets." "Thank you," Emma replied, setting her backpack on the bed. "It's more than enough." Maria lowered her voice. "Be careful here, mija. Don Bellamy, he is not a kind man. To people or animals. I've heard the stories." "Then you've heard about the new horse? The Black Mustang?" Emma shook her head. "Arrived 2 weeks ago. They say he killed a man in Wyoming. Bellamy bought him for $75,000 at auction in Kentucky. Pure vanity." Maria made the sign of the cross. 3 handlers already got hurt trying to work with him. They keep him separate from the other horses." Before Emma could ask more, Bradley Thompson, the head trainer, appeared in the doorway. Tall and weathered, with the arrogant posture of a man who believed horses existed to be broken to his will. "New cleaning girl? Kitchen needs mopping before dinner service," he said, not bothering with introductions. For the next 4 weeks, Emma learned the rhythms of Bellamy Ranch. She scrubbed bathrooms in the main house, mopped the kitchen twice daily, dusted endless displays of rodeo trophies and hunting prizes. She kept her head down when Bellamy entertained politicians, oil executives, and celebrities drawn to the authenticity of Texas wealth without wanting to endure actual Texas hardship. She avoided the main stables. The horse Maria had mentioned, the Black Mustang, occupied her thoughts, but Emma kept her distance. Years ago, she'd discovered her inexplicable connection to horses at the Peterson Ranch, where she'd spend afternoons watching the animals through the fence. The ranch hands had been astounded when the horses gravitated toward the silent Mexican girl, even the most skittish ones allowing her near. But that gift had brought more trouble than benefit in a town where Mexican Americans were expected to know their place. Until the Saturday morning when everything changed. Emma was carrying buckets of water to clean the guest bathrooms when she heard the shouting. Despite her better judgment, she set down the buckets and followed the commotion to the main training corral. 3 men struggled with ropes, trying to corner the most magnificent horse Emma had ever seen. Pure black, with powerful shoulders and a wild mane, the Mustang reared and kicked, eyes rolling with terror. The temporary enclosure they'd constructed barely contained his fury. Bradley raised a whip, face contorted with frustration. "We'll break him today or put him down. I don't care what Bellamy paid." "Stop!" The word escaped Emma before she could stop herself, echoing across the yard. Everyone froze, including the Mustang. All eyes turned to her, the Mexican cleaning girl suddenly visible. In that split second of distraction, the Mustang charged the makeshift fence. The wood splintered, and the men scattered, diving for safety. The horse could have trampled them, but instead stood trembling in the larger corral, nostrils flaring, eyes darting for escape. Richard Bellamy emerged from the barn, face darkening when he saw the broken enclosure. "What the hell happened here?" Bradley pointed at Emma. The cleaning girl spooked him. Bellamy's cold eyes found her. "And what business does my cleaning staff have interfering with my horse trainers?" Emma should have apologized, should have slunk back to her buckets and invisibility. Instead, something fierce and protective rose in her chest. "He's terrified," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It's not meanness, it's pure fear." Bradley snorted. "And what would a Mexican maid know about championship horses?" "Enough to see he's panicking, not being stubborn," Emma replied, then added, looking directly at Bellamy. "You paid $75,000 for an animal your men are traumatizing further." Bellamy's eyebrows rose. Whether at her knowledge of the price or her audacity, Emma couldn't tell. The ranch hands exchanged nervous glances. Something inexplicable happened then. The Mustang, still trembling with adrenaline, turned toward Emma. His breathing, which had been harsh and rapid, gradually slowed. The wild panic in his eyes shifted to something else. Wariness, yes, but also assessment. Emma moved toward the fence slowly. The men tensed, but she ignored them. She didn't extend her hand or make kissy noises like tourists at petting zoos. She simply stood, meeting the Mustang's gaze with steady respect. "También sé cómo es perder todo y no confiar en nadie," she whispered, her grandmother's mix of English and Spanish flowing naturally. "I know what it's like to lose everything and trust no one too." The Mustang took one step back, then another, but never broke eye contact. The aggression drained from his posture, replaced by wary curiosity. Old Joe Parker, the ranch foreman who'd been watching silently from the sidelines, removed his hat. "In 40 years, I ain't never seen anything like that." Bellamy studied Emma with new interest. Not respect, but calculation. His eyes flickered between her and the now calm Mustang, measuring potential value. "From tomorrow, you've got a new job, girl." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's see if this gift of yours is worth anything." That night, sleep eluded Emma. She sat on her narrow bed, staring through the small window at the Texas stars scattered like salt across the black sky. Her thoughts kept returning to the Mustang, to the intelligence in his eyes, the way his fear had momentarily yielded to connection. In her mind, she already called him phantasma, ghost, a free spirit trapped in a body marked by painful memories, just like her. Tomorrow would bring God knew what challenges from Bellamy, and resentment from Bradley. But for the first time since burying her grandmother, Emma felt purpose stirring in her chest. She'd recognized something in that horse that she understood all too well. The wariness of the chronically abandoned, the defensive rage of the repeatedly betrayed. And somehow, against all logic, he had recognized it in her too. Dawn broke over Bellamy Ranch with reluctant strokes of pink and gold across the vast Texas sky. Emma hadn't slept more than a few hours, her mind filled with images of the Black Mustang, Phantasma, as she'd already named him in her heart. She dressed quickly in the dim light filtering through her tiny window, carefully selecting her oldest, softest flannel shirt. No harsh colors or unfamiliar textures today. Everything about her approach would need to communicate calm. Before the ranch fully awakened, Emma slipped out of the staff quarters. She made a quick detour to the kitchen, where she found a small, slightly bruised apple in the fruit basket. Maria wouldn't miss one, she hoped. The path to the stables was quiet except for the distant call of a mourning dove. Emma stopped at the staff room, searching the shelves until she found what she was looking for. An abandoned paperback copy of The Old Man and the Sea, its spine cracked, pages yellowed with age and dusty fingerprints. Someone had left it behind long ago, perhaps after a long day of training horses the way Bellamy insisted, through domination rather than partnership. The main stable complex loomed ahead, and Emma slowed her pace. She knew Bellamy would be watching her progress with Phantasma closely. As she approached Phantasma's separate enclosure, she saw that a small crowd had already gathered. Bradley Thompson with his ever-present sneer, 2 other trainers, and Richard Bellamy himself, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. "Well, if it isn't our Mexican horse whisperer," Bradley announced loudly. "Got your magic beans ready, sweetheart?" Emma ignored him, focusing instead on Bellamy's stern expression. "You have 1 month," Bellamy declared without preamble. 1 month to show progress with this animal, or you're back to cleaning bathrooms. His eyes narrowed. "And I don't mean your kind of progress, reading poetry or whatever nonsense you have planned. I want to see that animal saddled and responding to commands." "Yes, sir," Emma replied, careful to keep her voice neutral. Bradley stepped forward, holding out a leather bridle with a severe bit and a training whip. "You'll need these. Start by showing him who's boss." Emma looked at the tools of domination and gently shook her head. "No, thank you. I won't be needing those." Bradley's laugh was like gravel. "The Mexican girl thinks she's a Disney princess. Horses don't respond to kindness. They respond to authority." "You have your methods, Mr. Thompson. I have mine." Emma walked past him toward Phantasma's enclosure. The Mustang stood at the far corner of the pen, his midnight coat gleaming in the morning light. His ears flicked forward at her approach, then back again, interest warring with suspicion. Emma could read the tension in his powerful shoulders, the way his weight shifted slightly, ready to flee if threatened. Instead of entering the enclosure, Emma settled cross-legged on the ground outside the fence, placing the apple beside her. She opened the Hemingway novel to the first page, took a deep breath, and began reading aloud. He was an old man who fished alone in a skiff in the Gulf Stream, and he had gone 84 days now without taking a fish. Bradley and the other trainers laughed openly. "What the hell is this?" one of them called out. "This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen," Bradley added. "Bellamy, you're not seriously going to let her waste time with story time, are you?" Bellamy studied Emma with narrowed eyes. 1 month, he repeated, before turning and walking back toward the main house, leaving Bradley and the others to continue their mockery. Emma ignored them all, keeping her voice steady as she read about the old fisherman's resilience and dignity. Phantasma remained in his corner, watching her with unblinking intensity. She didn't try to coax him closer or make eye contact. She simply read, page after page, her voice a gentle constant in his world of unpredictability. When she finished a chapter, Emma closed the book, placed the apple on the ground near the fence, and stood up slowly. "Hasta mañana, Phantasma," she said softly, then turned and walked away without looking back. The memory of her grandmother's teachings echoed in her mind as she left. "Los animales saben quién tiene prisa y quién tiene alma." Animals know who is in a hurry and who has soul. Emma returned that afternoon, and the next morning, and the afternoon after that. Each time she brought the book and read another chapter, always leaving an apple or carrot before departing. The routine never varied. She never stayed longer, never tried to enter the enclosure, never reached toward him. By the 5th day, the other trainers had grown bored with watching her ridiculous method, as Bradley called it. Only occasionally did someone stop by to check on her lack of progress and report back to Bellamy. On the 6th day, something changed. Emma arrived for her morning reading session to find Phantasma standing closer to the fence than before. Not close enough to touch, but no longer retreating to the farthest corner. His ears remained pricked forward throughout her reading, his eyes never leaving her face. When she placed the apple down and stood to leave, Phantasma took 2 steps toward the offering, not waiting until she was completely gone as he had done previously. That evening, Emma sat alone in the staff dining room, exhaustion weighing on her shoulders. The long days of cleaning, Bellamy had made it clear she was still responsible for her regular duties, combined with her early morning and late afternoon sessions with Phantasma, were taking their toll. Maria placed a plate of food in front of her with a gentle smile, the portion noticeably larger than what the other staff received. "Eat, mija. You need strength." The older woman glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard, then leaned closer. "I've heard about what you're doing with the Black Horse." Emma tensed. "Mr. Bellamy isn't happy with my progress." Maria waved away her concern. "Bellamy knows only dollars and dominance, but I've been watching you." She sat down across from Emma, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Mi padre tenía el don también." El susurro. "The whisper?" Emma asked. Maria nodded solemnly. "The ability to speak to the souls of animals. My father had it in Mexico. He could calm the wildest stallions, heal the sickest calves, not with force or medicine, but with something in his voice, in his presence." She reached across the table and squeezed Emma's hand. "You have it too. I see it." Emma felt a flush of emotion, the first recognition of her gift that didn't come with mockery or suspicion. "Thank you," she whispered, "but I don't know if it will be enough. Bellamy wants results on his timeline." "Patience," Maria counseled. "Even the wildest spirit can be reached with the right voice." Days stretched into weeks, and Emma's routine evolved subtly. After finishing her reading, she began to speak to Phantasma in soft Spanish, sharing stories of her childhood with her grandmother, of the small trailer they'd shared on the outskirts of Marfa, of the discrimination she'd faced at school. "Abuela always said that animals see our true selves," she told him one afternoon, the Texas sun casting long shadows across the enclosure. "Not our clothes or our accents or our bank accounts, just our hearts." Phantasma had begun moving closer each day. By the end of the 2nd week, he would approach the fence while she read, standing just beyond arm's reach, listening with what Emma could only describe as comprehension, though she knew others would call her fanciful for thinking it. The breakthrough came on the 17th day. Emma arrived with her usual apple and book, settling into her spot. Phantasma approached the fence almost immediately, nickering softly in greeting. When she placed the apple down, instead of waiting for her to back away as usual, he stretched his neck toward the offering while she was still beside it. Emma remained perfectly still as his muzzle gently brushed her fingers when he took the apple. The touch was electric, their first physical contact. She fought back tears as he crunched the fruit, his eyes never leaving hers. Word of this small miracle spread quickly through the ranch. That evening, Joe Parker sought her out as she was finishing her cleaning duties. "Heard you got him to take food from your hand today," the old foreman said, his weathered face unreadable. Emma nodded cautiously, unsure if this was another setup for mockery. "Bradley's been telling Bellamy you're wasting time," Joe continued, "but I told him I'm seeing progress like I've never seen before." He studied her for a moment. "In 40 years working with horses, I've never seen an approach like yours. It's slow, but there's something to it." Emma felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Parker." "Call me Joe," he said, then added gruffly, "Don't tell anyone I said anything nice. got a reputation to maintain. He started to walk away, then turned back. By the way, I left an old brush in the tack room, softer than the ones we usually use. Might come in handy soon. The next morning, Bradley confronted Emma as she headed to Phantasma's enclosure. 3 weeks gone, 1 to go, he sneered. Bellamy's starting to realize what a mistake he made with you. I'm making progress, Emma replied calmly. Reading books isn't progress, sweetheart. That's not a horse in there. It's a $75,000 investment. Bellamy doesn't care if it likes you. He cares if it performs. Emma met his gaze steadily. His name is Phantasma. Bradley's laugh was harsh. Phantasma? You named a piece of Bellamy's property? He shook his head in mock disbelief. You really don't get it, do you? That animal isn't a pet. It's merchandise. Everything deserves a name that reflects its essence, not its market value, Emma replied, refusing to be baited. Before Bradley could respond, Joe's voice cut through the morning air. Bradley, Bellamy needs you at the main house. Now. With a final contemptuous glance at Emma, Bradley stalked off. Joe gave her the slightest nod before returning to his duties. In the final week of her trial period, Emma began bringing the soft brush Joe had provided. She didn't attempt to use it yet, simply setting it beside her as she read and talked. Phantasma eyed it warily at first, but as with everything in Emma's approach, familiarity gradually replaced fear. Several of the ranch hands had begun pausing in their work to observe her sessions from a distance. Among them was Lisa Ortega, the 16-year-old daughter of one of the vaqueros, who approached Emma one afternoon with shy admiration. "Can I watch you with Phantasma?" she asked, her eyes bright with interest. "Of course," Emma replied, touched by the girl's genuine curiosity. "The way you talk to him, it's like you're having a conversation, even though he doesn't talk back," Lisa observed. Emma smiled. "He does talk back, just not with words. Watch his ears, his eyes, the way he holds his body. He's always communicating." As her deadline approached, Emma knew she needed to take a significant step forward. Bellamy had made it clear that merely feeding Phantasma from her hand wouldn't be enough to keep her from returning to full-time cleaning duties. On a cloudy morning, 3 days before her month was up, Emma made her decision. After reading and talking as usual, she picked up the brush and, for the first time, opened the gate to Phantasma's enclosure. The entire stable yard seemed to hold its breath. From the corner of her eye, Emma could see that word had spread. Ranch hands paused in their tasks, and even Bradley watched from a distance, no doubt hoping to witness her failure or injury. Emma stepped into the enclosure and closed the gate behind her. Phantasma backed away several steps, nostrils flaring at this change in routine. Emma didn't approach him. Instead, she moved to the center of the space and sat down cross-legged, placing the brush on the ground beside her. Time stretched like molasses in the summer heat. Emma didn't move, didn't call to him, didn't extend her hand. She simply existed in his space, offering presence without pressure. After what seemed like hours but was probably 20 minutes, Phantasma began to circle her, maintaining his distance but studying her from all angles. Gradually, the circles tightened. Emma remained still, her breathing steady, her energy calm. Finally, in a moment that brought tears to her eyes, Phantasma approached directly. He stretched his neck forward, nostrils flaring as he took in her scent. Then, in a gesture of surrender and trust that spoke volumes, he lowered his proud head and allowed Emma to touch his neck. The brush remained unused that day. The touch of her hand was miracle enough. That evening, during dinner, Bradley accidentally spilled hot coffee down Emma's back as he passed behind her chair. "Sorry," he said with transparent insincerity. "Didn't see you there. Maybe because you're nobody." Emma bit back a cry of pain as the scalding liquid soaked through her shirt. Maria rushed over with a damp cloth, murmuring sympathetic Spanish phrases as she helped Emma clean up. The next morning, Emma arrived at the enclosure with the brush again. This time, Phantasma greeted her at the fence, nickering softly. When she entered, he approached with less hesitation than before. Emma began speaking softly in Spanish as she raised the brush. "Suave, mi amigo. Gentle, my friend. This will feel good, I promise." The first stroke of the brush against his neck was tentative. Phantasma tensed but didn't pull away. Slowly, Emma established a rhythm, the soft bristles removing dust and, perhaps symbolically, some of the painful memories from his gleaming coat. As she worked, Emma found herself crying silently, overwhelmed by the trust this magnificent creature was placing in her. Phantasma stood with his eyes half closed, his lower lip drooping in relaxation. The first time he had fully let down his guard since arriving at the ranch. Unbeknownst to Emma, Richard Bellamy watched from his office window, binoculars trained on the remarkable scene unfolding in the enclosure. His expression revealed no appreciation for the moment's beauty, only calculation of its potential value. On a particularly hot afternoon, when the Texas sun punished the ranch mercilessly, Emma brought a bucket of fresh water to Phantasma's enclosure. She placed it in the center and stepped back. The Mustang, thirsty but still cautious, approached the bucket carefully. As he drank, Emma softly began to sing an old Spanish lullaby her grandmother had sung to her as a child. The Mustang raised his head, water dripping from his muzzle, and looked directly at her. There was no fear in his eyes now. Trust bloomed between Emma and Phantasma like a rare desert flower, delicate yet resilient. Each morning, ranch hands would pause their work to witness the quiet miracle unfolding in the Mustang's enclosure. The wild horse that had once attacked 3 handlers now lowered his proud head to accept Emma's touch, his eyes soft with a trust that seemed impossible just weeks before. "It's like watching someone speak a language I didn't know existed," Joe Parker confided to Maria in the kitchen, unaware that Emma was filling her water bottle just around the corner. Emma smiled to herself as she walked toward Phantasma's enclosure, carrying the soft brush that had become her most treasured tool. The deadline Bellamy had imposed was fast approaching, just 3 more days to prove that her methods weren't a waste of time. The pressure weighed on her shoulders, but she refused to let Phantasma sense her anxiety. "Buenos dias, hermoso," she called softly as she approached. Phantasma's ears pricked forward at the sound of her voice, and he moved to the fence to greet her, nickering softly, a sound he reserved only for her. Emma entered the enclosure with the casual confidence that had developed between them. Today felt different. The air was charged with possibility, the connection between them almost tangible. As she brushed his gleaming coat, Emma sensed Phantasma was ready for another step forward. "I think today we might try something new," she murmured, running her hand along his powerful neck. The Mustang's muscles twitched beneath her touch, not in fear, but in awareness. She hadn't noticed Bradley Thompson approaching until his shadow fell across the enclosure. "3 days left," he announced, arms crossed over his chest. "Bellamy wants to see you on that horse by Friday, or you're back to scrubbing toilets." Emma continued brushing Phantasma, keeping her movements smooth and unhurried despite the intrusion. "We're making progress at the pace that works for both of us." Bradley snorted. "That's not how it works here. Horses don't set the timeline. People do." He tapped his watch. 3 days, sweetheart. Tick-tock." As Bradley walked away, Emma felt Phantasma tense beneath her hand. The Mustang's eyes tracked the trainer, nostrils flaring slightly. He remembered the whip, the harsh voice, the attempted domination. "Está bien," Emma soothed, stepping into Phantasma's line of sight to break his focus on Bradley. "He can't hurt you anymore. I won't let him." Later that afternoon, Emma sat cross-legged in the shade of a mesquite tree just outside Phantasma's enclosure, watching as the Mustang paced restlessly. Bradley's visit had disrupted the calm they'd established, reminding her that their peaceful bubble existed at Bellamy's pleasure. A tentative voice broke her reverie. "Can I sit with you?" Emma looked up to find Lisa Ortega, the vaquero's daughter, standing nervously nearby. "Of course," Emma patted the ground beside her. Lisa settled down, tucking her legs beneath her. At 16, she had the guarded optimism of someone who'd grown up witnessing both beauty and harshness on the ranch. "Everyone's talking about you and Phantasma," Lisa said, watching the Mustang with undisguised admiration. My dad says he's never seen anything like it. Emma smiled. Your father has been kind. Not everyone appreciates our approach. Bradley says it's a waste of time, Lisa admitted. But I've been watching. It's like you're having a conversation without words. She hesitated, then added, Could you teach me how to listen to horses like that? Before Emma could answer, Phantasma approached the fence, eyeing Lisa with cautious interest. He's curious about you, Emma observed. Stay still and breathe normally. Let him decide if he wants to know you. Lisa froze, barely breathing. Relax, Emma laughed softly. He can sense tension. Just be yourself. The girl visibly exhaled, her shoulders dropping. Phantasma stretched his neck over the fence, nostrils flaring as he took in her scent. He's reading you, Emma explained. Horses don't care about words. They care about energy, intention, truth. Does he have a favorite food? Lisa asked, still maintaining her calm posture. Apples, red ones especially. Lisa's face brightened. I'll bring one tomorrow. If that's okay? Emma nodded, touched by the girl's enthusiasm. I think he'd like that. That evening, Emma stopped by the kitchen after finishing her cleaning duties. Maria was preparing dough for tomorrow's bread, her strong hands kneading with practiced efficiency. You look tired, Mija, Maria observed, wiping flour from her cheek. Sit, eat something. Emma sank into a chair, accepting the plate of leftover enchiladas Maria pushed toward her. Bellamy's deadline is in 3 days. Bradley made sure to remind me. Maria snorted. Bradley Thompson is afraid of you. Of me? Emma laughed. Why would he fear a cleaning girl? Because you accomplish with gentleness what he cannot force with cruelty. Maria sat across from her, lowering her voice. And because the other workers are noticing. This morning, Jorge asked Bradley why he couldn't try your methods with the young colts instead of breaking them so harshly. Emma's eyes widened. What did Bradley say? Nothing fit for decent ears, Maria chuckled, but his face turned the color of ripe tomatoes. As Emma walked back to her quarters that night, she felt a curious sensation, a shifting in the atmosphere of the ranch. Small nods from workers who had previously ignored her, whispered "Buenas noches" from faces half hidden in the shadows. Something was changing, not just between her and Phantasma, but in the wider ecosystem of Bellamy Ranch. The next morning, Emma arrived at the enclosure with renewed determination. If she had only 3 days to demonstrate Phantasma's progress, she would need to take another significant step forward. She brought with her a length of soft rope, not a lead or halter, just a simple strand that might someday become one, if Phantasma accepted it. The Mustang greeted her warmly, but his attention quickly shifted to something behind her. Emma turned to find Lisa approaching cautiously, a shiny red apple cupped in her hands. I brought breakfast, the girl announced, her voice hushed with excitement. Emma smiled, beckoning her closer. Perfect timing. I was about to introduce Phantasma to the concept of rope. She showed Lisa the soft cord, not to control him, but to help him understand that not all human tools are meant to hurt. Lisa watched with rapt attention as Emma entered the enclosure, Phantasma's eyes fixed on the rope, his body tensing slightly. Está bien, Emma soothed, letting the rope hang limply from her hand. It's just a new friend, like Lisa. She stood quietly, allowing Phantasma to approach in his own time. The Mustang circled her warily, nostrils flaring as he scented the unfamiliar object. See how he's processing? Emma narrated softly for Lisa's benefit. He's making his own decision about whether this is a threat. After several minutes of careful investigation, Phantasma nudged the rope with his muzzle. Emma remained still, letting him explore the texture. When he seemed comfortable, she slowly raised her hand, bringing the rope higher. We're just getting acquainted today, she explained to Lisa. No pressure, no expectations. The session continued with gentle introductions, the rope touching Phantasma's neck briefly, then retreating. Touch and release, never forcing, never hurrying. When they finished, Emma invited Lisa to offer the apple through the fence. The girl's face glowed with delight when Phantasma delicately took the fruit from her palm. "He's so gentle," Lisa whispered in awe. "He chooses to be gentle," Emma corrected. "That's what makes it meaningful." Later that afternoon, Emma was cleaning the staff bathroom when she heard raised voices from Bellamy's office. The window was cracked open despite the air conditioning, and Bradley's agitated tone carried clearly. "She's undermining everything we do here," Bradley insisted. "The Mexican girl has the staff questioning our methods. Yesterday, Jorge had the nerve to suggest we were too harsh with the yearlings." Bellamy's response was measured, calculating. "The question is whether her methods produce results we can profit from, Thompson. I don't care if she sings lullabies or reads poetry to that Mustang. If he performs at San Antonio, she's worth her weight in gold." "It's a fluke," Bradley argued. "She got lucky with one traumatized horse. That doesn't mean results, Thompson. That's all that matters in this business. If her whispers work where your whip failed, whose fault is that?" Emma moved away quickly, heart pounding. Bellamy didn't care about Phantasma's well-being or her connection with him, only the potential profit. And Bradley's resentment was growing more dangerous by the day. That evening, at the staff dinner, Bradley made his move. As Emma reached for a glass of water, his elbow, accidentally, knocked over his coffee cup, sending the hot liquid cascading down her back. She bit back a cry of pain as the scalding coffee soaked through her shirt. "Sorry," Bradley smirked, making no move to help. "Didn't see you there. Maybe because you're nobody." The room fell silent. Emma stood frozen, coffee dripping from her clothes, the burning sensation spreading across her skin. Before she could respond, Maria rushed over with a damp cloth, murmuring soothing Spanish phrases. "Let me help you, mija," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, her eyes flashing with anger at Bradley. Joe Parker, who had witnessed the entire incident, stood up slowly. His weathered face was impassive, but his voice carried authority earned through decades of respect. "Funny how your clumsiness only happens around certain people, Bradley," he observed quietly. "Almost like it's not an accident at all." Bradley's face flushed. "Mind your own business, old man." "The dignity of my crew is my business," Joe replied evenly. "Always has been." Emma slipped away during the confrontation, Maria's comforting arm around her shoulders. In her tiny room, the older woman helped her apply aloe to the reddened skin of her back. "Bradley fears what he cannot understand," Maria sighed, her gentle hands working methodically. "And he understands nothing of connection, only control." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Emma arrived at Phantasma's enclosure earlier than usual, needing the peace of their connection after the previous night's humiliation. To her surprise, the Mustang seemed to sense her distress. He approached immediately, nickering softly, his muzzle gently nudging her shoulder in what felt remarkably like comfort. "You always know, don't you?" Emma whispered, pressing her forehead against his. "When something's wrong." She spent the morning working with the soft rope again, gradually introducing it around Phantasma's neck, never tying it, simply letting him feel the light pressure and release. By mid-morning, he allowed her to loop it loosely like a guide, following her subtle cues to turn or stop, not through force, but through choice. Word spread quickly. By afternoon, a small audience had gathered at a respectful distance, stable hands, groundskeepers, even two of the house staff. Emma noticed Lisa filming discreetly with her phone. Bradley appeared, his face darkening at the sight of the impromptu audience. "What's this, a circus show?" he barked, causing several workers to quickly disperse. Lisa, however, stood her ground. "I'm doing a school project on nonverbal communication," she explained, her voice betraying only a slight tremor. Bradley turned his glare on Emma. "Phantasma? You actually named a $75,000 piece of Bellamy property?" Emma continued working with Phantasma, maintaining her calm for the horse's sake. "Everything deserves a name that reflects its essence, not its market value. It's livestock, not a pet," Bradley sneered. "Next, you'll be giving names to the steaks in the freezer." Joe Parker appeared, seemingly from nowhere. His timing was impeccable as always. Pegasus, Bucephalus, Tornado, he recited, naming famous horses throughout history. The great horses have always had names given by those who understood them. He fixed Bradley with a level gaze. Not much of a horseman if you don't know that basic history. Bradley stalked off, muttering under his breath. Joe gave Emma a nearly imperceptible nod before following. The final day of Emma's trial period arrived with a sense of inevitability. She had made remarkable progress with Phantasma, but would it be enough to satisfy Bellamy's demands? The Mustang now allowed her to guide him with the gentlest pressure of the rope, responded to verbal cues in both English and Spanish, and even permitted her to lean against his side, a position of profound vulnerability with such a powerful animal. As the sun reached its zenith, Emma took the brush and began the rhythmic strokes that Phantasma now clearly enjoyed. His eyes half closed in contentment, lower lip drooping in relaxation. "You're magnificent," she murmured in Spanish, working the brush through his gleaming mane. "So strong, yet so gentle when you choose to be." As she worked, she spoke softly about freedom. Real freedom, not just the absence of fences but the presence of choice. Phantasma listened, as he always seemed to, his ears flicking toward her voice, his breathing synchronized with hers. When she finished, he did something unprecedented. He lowered his head and rested it against her chest, a gesture of complete trust that brought tears to Emma's eyes. For a long moment, they stood together in perfect communion, the formerly indomitable Mustang surrendering not to dominance, but to partnership. Unknown to Emma, Richard Bellamy watched from the hill above, binoculars trained on the remarkable scene below. His expression revealed no appreciation for the beauty of the moment, only cold calculation of its potential profit. The next morning, Emma arrived at the stable to find Phantasma agitated, pacing his enclosure and nickering anxiously when he saw her. As she approached, she understood why. Laid out neatly on a table outside the enclosure were traditional breaking tools, heavy leather harnesses, severe bits, sharp spurs, and a training whip. Beside them lay a note in Bellamy's immaculate handwriting. "Today, you mount him the traditional way, or you're both out of my ranch." Emma stared at the tools of domination laid out before her, her stomach twisting into knots. The heavy bridle with its severe bit would cause Phantasma pain. The sharp spurs would puncture his sensitive skin. The whip would terrorize him. She ran her fingers across the leather bridle, unable to hide her revulsion. Everything they had built together, the trust, the connection, the gentle understanding, would be shattered if she used these instruments of control. "Hora de la verdad, Mexicanita." Bellamy's voice startled her. He approached with Bradley and several other ranch hands trailing behind him, their faces a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. "Show us if you're really special or just wasting my time." Emma turned to look at Phantasma. The Mustang paced anxiously in his enclosure, sensing the tension radiating from the group of men. His ears flicked back and forth, nostrils flaring as he caught the scent of leather and metal, smells likely associated with previous trauma. A memory flashed in Emma's mind, her grandmother's weathered hands gently guiding hers as a child. "La confianza no se fuerza, se ofrece como un regalo," Consuelo had told her. "Trust isn't forced, it's offered as a gift." With quiet determination, Emma walked past the table of equipment, taking only a single item, the soft rope she had been using in their sessions. Bellamy's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing as she approached Phantasma's enclosure. Bradley laughed, nudging a fellow trainer. "She's going to get herself killed. Anyone filming this? Could go viral." Emma took a deep breath and opened the gate, stepping inside with just the rope looped loosely over her shoulder. She closed the gate behind her, sealing herself in with an animal that had once been considered too dangerous to approach. Phantasma backed away, his eyes darting between Emma and the men watching from outside. The Mustang's entire body conveyed tension, muscles bunched beneath his glossy coat, tail swishing nervously. Emma moved to the center of the enclosure and began speaking in a low, steady voice. "I know you're scared," she said softly in Spanish. "They want me to force you today, to break your spirit." She switched to English, aware that Bellamy was listening. "But that's not who we are together, is it? We've built something different, something based on choice." Bradley snorted. "Talking to it like it understands English or Spanish. This is ridiculous." Emma ignored him, focusing entirely on Phantasma. The men, the ranch, even Bellamy's ultimatum, all faded into the background as she centered herself in this critical moment. Then, in a move that drew audible gasps from the observers, Emma sat down in the dirt, her back to Phantasma. A profound silence fell over the group. Even Bradley seemed shocked into muteness. "What is she doing?" someone whispered. "Never seen anyone turn their back on a wild Mustang," another replied. Joe Parker, standing apart from the others, murmured just loud enough to be heard. "Never seen anyone trust a horse like that before." Emma sat perfectly still, her back exposed to Phantasma, the ultimate position of vulnerability. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, but her breathing remained calm and even. This was the moment of truth. Either Phantasma trusted her enough to overcome his fear of the watching men, or everything they had built would crumble under pressure. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. No one spoke. No one moved. Then, soft hoofbeats approached from behind. Emma resisted the overwhelming urge to turn around, to protect herself. She continued to breathe evenly, projecting calm despite her racing heart. A warm breath tickled the back of her neck. Phantasma had approached and now stood directly behind her, his muzzle hovering just above her shoulder. Slowly, with exquisite gentleness, he touched her shoulder with his nose, a gesture of recognition, of trust returned. Emma waited another long moment before slowly rising to her feet. Phantasma didn't retreat. She turned to face him, meeting his intelligent gaze. Years of abuse and fear still lurked in those dark eyes, but something else shone through now, a willingness to try, to trust, to connect. "Gracias," she whispered, reaching for the soft rope. Phantasma watched her movements but remained still as she gently looped it around his neck, leaving it loose, a symbolic connection rather than a means of control. With the lightest pressure on the rope and her voice offering quiet guidance, Emma began to walk. Phantasma followed, their movements synchronized as if they had rehearsed for years. She led him in a wide circle around the enclosure, then stopped. The Mustang halted beside her, attentive but relaxed. Using only her voice and the occasional light touch on his neck, Emma guided Phantasma through a series of movements, turning, backing up, stopping, and starting again. Each request was offered rather than demanded, each response freely given rather than coerced. Bellamy watched with narrowed eyes. When Emma completed the demonstration, he clicked his tongue in dissatisfaction. "That's not riding. That's just walking a horse around like a dog." Emma met his gaze steadily. "This is the foundation. Without trust, there is no partnership. I didn't hire you for philosophy, girl. I hired you to get that horse ready to perform. That means riding." Emma turned back to Phantasma, her heart sinking. She had hoped the demonstration of control without force would be enough. Clearly it wasn't. She had three choices: attempt to ride him before he was ready and risk destroying their connection, refuse and lose her position at the ranch, or find a third way. She approached Phantasma, placing her hand on his neck, feeling the steady pulse beneath her fingers. Leaning close to his ear, she whispered something that none of the men could hear. A question, a request, an offering of choice. What happened next would be discussed in Marfa for years to come. Phantasma, the Mustang that had attacked 3 handlers before coming to Bellamy Ranch, the horse deemed unrideable by experts, deliberately lowered himself, bending his front legs in a gesture that unmistakably invited Emma onto his back. "Holy shit," Bradley breathed, his customary arrogance momentarily forgotten. Emma gathered the soft rope and, with fluid grace, mounted Phantasma bareback. No saddle, no bit, no spurs, just the rope loosely held as a guide. The Mustang rose carefully, adjusting to her weight, his ears flicking back to catch her soft words of encouragement. Together, they began to move around the enclosure. Emma used subtle shifts in her weight and gentle pressure from her legs to guide him, supplemented by occasional light touches on his neck with the rope. Phantasma responded with remarkable sensitivity, his powerful body moving in perfect harmony with her subtle cues. The silence that had fallen over the observers was profound. Even Bellamy seemed momentarily at a loss for words as he watched the graceful circuit of the enclosure. When Emma finally slid from Phantasma's back, landing lightly in the dust, she turned to face Bellamy. The expression on his face had shifted from skepticism to calculation, not appreciation for the miracle they had just witnessed, but assessment of its potential value. "Well," he said finally, "it seems your methods have some merit after all." Bradley, unable to conceal his jealousy, broke the moment with forced laughter. "Beginner's luck. Anyone can ride a horse in a controlled enclosure. Let's see her try that out on the range with real distractions." His voice trembled slightly, betraying his envy as Bellamy studied Emma with newfound interest. "Start preparing him for the San Antonio Rodeo in 3 months," Bellamy announced. "We're going to show Texas what an unbreakable Mustang is worth in the right hands. In my hands." Emma stroked Phantasma's neck, hiding her reaction to Bellamy's words. The rodeo meant crowds, noise, pressure, everything that would terrify a horse still healing from trauma. But she had bought them time, and for now, that would have to be enough. Later that evening, Emma sat alone on the steps outside the staff quarters, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in vivid oranges and purples. Joe Parker approached, his weathered boots scuffing the gravel to announce his presence. "That was something today," he said, settling beside her. "In 40 years working with horses, I've never seen anything like it." "He chose," Emma replied simply. "That's what made it special." Joe nodded thoughtfully. "That's what Bradley and Bellamy don't understand. They see only what they can take from a horse. You see what you can give." He stood up, knees cracking. "Be careful, Emma. What happened today? It changes things. Bellamy sees dollar signs now, not just a troublesome horse. And Bradley." He hesitated. "Bradley doesn't forgive being shown up, especially by someone he considers beneath him." After Joe left, Emma remained on the steps until the first stars appeared. Her victory today had changed the dynamics at Bellamy Ranch, but it had also raised the stakes. Bellamy would expect more spectacular results, more quickly. Bradley would look for ways to undermine her. And Phantasma, beautiful, trusting Phantasma, would be pushed toward a spotlight he had never asked for. "We'll find a way," she whispered to the emerging stars, making a promise to herself and the Mustang, who had placed his trust in her hands. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." The next morning, Emma arrived at the stables to find a package waiting outside her tack room. Inside was a beautiful hand-tooled halter of supple leather, crafted for comfort rather than control. A note in Joe's cramped handwriting read simply, "For the road ahead, it gets harder from here." When Emma went to Phantasma's enclosure, Bradley was already there, studying the Mustang with unconcealed resentment. "Luck won't save you forever, sweetheart," he said as she approached. "Bellamy wants that horse performing tricks in 3 months. Your little whispers and soft touches won't be enough." Emma met his gaze steadily. "We'll be ready." "We'll see," Bradley replied, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Beginner's luck can only take you so far." As he walked away, Emma felt a chill despite the morning warmth. When she turned back to Phantasma, the Mustang was watching her intently, as if he understood the challenges that lay ahead. He nickered softly, moving to the fence to greet her. "Buenos dias, mi amigo," she said, reaching out to touch his velvety muzzle. "We showed them yesterday, didn't we? But today is a new day, with new battles to fight." Phantasma's ears pricked forward, his intelligent eyes fixed on her face. In that moment, Emma knew with absolute certainty that whatever came next, Bellamy's demands, Bradley's sabotage, the looming pressure of the rodeo, they would face it together, not as trainer and horse, but as partners who had chosen each other. The rhythms of Bellamy Ranch shifted perceptibly after Emma's breakthrough with Phantasma. Where she had once been invisible, a shadow with a mop and bucket, ranch hands now nodded respectfully as she passed. Conversations fell silent when she entered rooms, not from dismissal but from a new, uncertain deference. Success had made her visible in ways both empowering and dangerous. Early on a Tuesday morning, Richard Bellamy summoned the entire staff to the main courtyard. Emma stood at the back of the gathered workers, sensing what was coming. Bellamy, immaculate in pressed jeans and a custom leather vest, surveyed his employees with the practiced smile of a politician. "Some of you have witnessed something extraordinary these past weeks," he began, his voice carrying across the yard. "A horse deemed unrideable, responding to our very own Emma Ramirez." He gestured for her to join him at the front. Emma moved forward reluctantly, feeling Bradley's glare burning into her back. Phantasma watched from his enclosure, ears pricked forward at the sight of her. "I'm promoting Emma to assistant trainer, effective immediately," Bellamy announced. "She'll be focused exclusively on preparing our prize Mustang for the San Antonio Rodeo." Scattered applause broke out, led enthusiastically by Maria and Joe. Emma noticed that Bradley's hands remained firmly crossed over his chest. "Thank you, Mr. Bellamy," she said quietly, her eyes finding Phantasma's across the yard. The Mustang's steady gaze grounded her amid the sudden attention. After the meeting dispersed, Bellamy walked her to a small office in the training complex, a dusty room previously used for storage. "This is yours now," he said, flicking on the light to reveal a metal desk, a chair with a cracked vinyl seat, and shelves lined with old training manuals. "I expect daily progress reports. Bradley will oversee your work." Emma nodded, noting how Bellamy referred to her success as ours in public, but maintained his distance privately. More telling was the absence of any mention of a raise. Her promotion came with a grander title but the same meager paycheck. "That Mustang needs to perform complex maneuvers by San Antonio," Bellamy continued. "Figure eights, sliding stops, spins, the works. People pay to see spectacle, not just a girl riding bareback." "Phantasma is still building confidence," Emma cautioned. "Rushing him could—" "Phantasma?" Bellamy interrupted, eyebrows rising. "Right, your little nickname. Call it whatever you want in private, but in public, we're marketing him as Midnight Demon. Has a better ring for the rodeo crowd." After Bellamy left, Emma explored her new domain. The shelves held dusty volumes on horse training, most advocating the breaking methods she'd rejected. But behind them, she discovered several older books with yellowed pages, translations of Spanish texts on classical horsemanship that emphasized partnership over domination. Emma ran her fingers reverently over the forgotten volumes, sensing allies from the past. That afternoon, Emma took Phantasma out of his enclosure for the first time. With just the soft rope as guidance, they walked together through the less trafficked areas of the ranch. The Mustang moved with high-stepping caution, hyper-aware of his new surroundings. Every unfamiliar sound, a tractor in the distance, a door slamming, caused his muscles to bunch beneath Emma's gentle hand on his neck. "You're safe," she murmured in Spanish, maintaining a calm, steady energy beside him. "I won't take you anywhere dangerous." Ranch hands paused in their work to watch the remarkable sight, the infamous black Mustang walking calmly beside the slight Mexican-American woman, no restraints beyond a loose rope and the invisible bond between them. As they crested a small rise overlooking a meadow dotted with wildflowers, Emma stopped. Phantasma halted beside her, his breathing synchronized with hers. "This is what freedom should feel like," she told him softly. "Space to move, choices to make, someone who respects your spirit." For nearly an hour, they simply existed together in the open space. Emma sat in the grass while Phantasma grazed nearby, always keeping her in his sight, occasionally approaching to touch his muzzle to her shoulder, as if checking that she remained real. When they returned to the stables, Bradley was waiting, arms crossed and face tight with resentment. "Nice nature walk," he sneered. Meanwhile, I've been reviewing Bellamy's expectations for the rodeo demonstration. He thrust a paper into her hands, a list of complex maneuvers, many requiring precise control that would strain their developing partnership. He needs to learn to perform, not just follow you around like a pet dog, Bradley continued. We need to start using proper equipment, spurs, training bit, show saddle. Emma studied the list, her heart sinking at the aggressive timeline. He's not ready for this level of, he better get ready, Bradley cut her off. Bellamy's already promoting his appearance to sponsors. 3 months, sweetheart. The clock's ticking. Later that week, Bellamy arrived at the training arena with Carter Williams, a specialist from the rodeo circuit in Dallas. Carter exuded the artificial charm of a man who performed himself as much as he trained horses to perform. All white teeth, pressed shirt, and polished boots that had rarely seen real ranch work. So this is our miracle Mustang, Carter said, studying Phantasma with a professional eye. Beautiful animal, strong quarters, good conformation. You've done well getting this far, honey, but now we need to prepare him for the spotlight. Emma bristled at the condescending honey, but kept her focus on Phantasma, who was already tensing at the stranger's evaluating gaze. Carter turned to a large case he'd brought, opening it to reveal gleaming equipment. Sharp spurs, a severe bit with long shanks for maximum leverage, and a weighted training saddle designed to force a horse into an exaggerated show posture. These will get the results Bellamy wants, Carter explained, lifting the bit. The pressure points ensure immediate compliance. Emma stepped between Carter and Phantasma's enclosure. We won't be using those methods. They would destroy everything we've built. Carter laughed, looking to Bellamy for support. Mr. Bellamy, with all due respect to your assistant trainer here, you can't prepare a rodeo horse with whispers and carrots. You need proper equipment. Bellamy frowned, clearly torn between his desire for spectacular results and the undeniable progress Emma had already achieved through her unconventional methods. Let's see what she can demonstrate first, he decided, motioning for Emma to proceed. Emma entered Phantasma's enclosure with only her soft rope. The Mustang was already agitated by the strangers and their threatening equipment. She spent several minutes simply breathing with him, stroking his neck, murmuring reassurances in Spanish until his trembling subsided. Then, with subtle cues, a light touch here, a soft word there, she guided him through a series of movements. Phantasma responded with the fluid grace that came from willing partnership rather than forced compliance. When she asked for a spin, he offered it freely, pivoting on his hind legs with natural balance. Carter watched with grudging respect, though his commercial instincts quickly reasserted themselves. It's impressive bonding, he admitted, but audiences expect flash, precision, dramatic movements. Those require more persuasive methods. He'll obey through respect, not fear, Emma insisted, her voice quiet but firm. If we use these, she gestured to the cruel equipment, we'll lose everything we've built. He'll shut down or revert to aggression. The confrontation was interrupted by Lisa Ortega, who approached hesitantly, phone in hand. Excuse me, she said, her voice small but determined. I've been documenting Emma's training methods for my science project on nonverbal communication. Would it be okay if I recorded today's session too? Bellamy, always conscious of appearances, immediately softened his expression. Of course, young lady. Bellamy Ranch supports education. Emma caught Lisa's eye, silently thanking her for the timely intervention. The girl's presence ensured that the more aggressive training methods would remain packed away, at least for now. That evening, Joe Parker found Emma in the tack room, examining the traditional training equipment with dismay. Bellamy's getting pressure from his rodeo contacts, Joe informed her quietly. They want a spectacle. The killer Mustang performing impossible maneuvers makes for better publicity than gentle partnership. Emma sighed, setting down a particularly vicious spur. What should I do, Joe? I won't hurt Phantasma for entertainment. The old foreman's weathered face softened. In my 40 years of experience, I've never seen what you've accomplished with that horse. Bellamy may not understand it, but I do. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Show him that your way gets results. Make your method too valuable to discard. The next morning, Emma arrived at Phantasma's enclosure to find Bradley already there, examining the feed bucket suspiciously. "What are you doing?" she demanded, instantly alert. Bradley straightened, his face assuming an unconvincing innocence. "Just checking if our star attraction is getting the premium feed," Bellamy ordered. Emma moved quickly to the bucket, inspecting it closely. Nothing seemed obviously wrong, but Phantasma was watching Bradley with unusual intensity. His nostrils flared in what she'd come to recognize as distress. "If I find out you've tampered with anything," she began. "You'll what?" Bradley smirked. "Run to Bellamy? You're just the flavor of the month, sweetheart. When that horse fails to perform at San Antonio, you'll be back scrubbing toilets and I'll be in charge again." After Bradley left, Emma dumped the feed and provided fresh hay, unwilling to risk Phantasma's well-being. She couldn't prove sabotage, but the Mustang's reaction told her everything she needed to know. Later that evening, Emma found refuge in the kitchen where Maria was preparing tomorrow's bread. The rhythmic kneading of dough seemed to calm both women as Emma confided her fears. "They don't understand that horses aren't machines you can program to entertain," she said, watching Maria's strong hands work the dough. "Phantasma is healing, finding trust again. Pushing him into performance tricks could undo everything." Maria nodded sympathetically. "Men like Bellamy and Bradley see the world as things to own, to control. They cannot understand a relationship based on respect." She paused her kneading, fixing Emma with a serious gaze. "Be careful, mija. When men like that feel their control slipping, they become dangerous." That night, Emma found a note slipped under her door. "Watch out for tomorrow's visit. Bellamy has invited Franklin Reynolds, Texas's biggest horse buyer," and felt a chill run down her spine when she read the last line. "He doesn't buy horses for shows or racing. He buys for veterinary research labs where no animal survives more than 6 months." Emma stared at the anonymous note in her trembling hands, reading it again by the dim light filtering through her tiny window. "He buys for veterinary research labs where no animal survives more than 6 months." The paper crinkled in her tightening grip as the full implication settled into her chest like a stone. She'd heard whispers of such places, laboratories where animals were used for experimental procedures, their suffering hidden behind sterile walls and scientific terminology. Before the sun had fully crested the horizon, Emma was racing across the ranch grounds toward Phantasma's enclosure. Morning dew soaked through her worn boots as she ran, breath forming small clouds in the early autumn chill. She needed to see him, to assure herself he was still there, still safe, at least for now. Phantasma nickered softly when he spotted her, moving to the fence with ears pricked forward in greeting. Emma pressed her forehead against his, breathing in his familiar scent of hay and earth and wild things. "I won't let them take you," she whispered fiercely in Spanish. "Lo prometo." "You should be careful making promises you might not be able to keep." Emma turned to find Joe Parker approaching, his weathered face grave in the early light. The old foreman glanced around to ensure they were alone before speaking. "I left that note," he admitted quietly. "Reynolds is arriving at 10. Bellamy's been negotiating with him for days." "Why would Bellamy sell him?" Emma asked, one hand still touching Phantasma's muzzle. "He's been promoting his appearance at the rodeo." Joe's mouth tightened into a grim line. "Reynolds offered 3 times what Bellamy paid, and Bellamy's a businessman first, last, and always." He adjusted his worn hat. "Be careful today. Reynolds isn't who he appears to be." By mid-morning, the ranch was bustling with unusual activity. Staff had been instructed to wear their best clothes, stables were given extra cleaning, and even the gravel driveway had been freshly raked. Emma watched from Phantasma's enclosure as a gleaming black SUV with tinted windows rolled up the drive, kicking up dust despite its slow, deliberate pace. Franklin Reynolds emerged like a caricature of Texas wealth. A heavy-set man in his 50s wearing an expensive cowboy hat that had clearly never seen real ranch work, boots polished to a mirror shine, and a belt buckle large enough to serve dinner on. His smile revealed teeth too perfect to be natural, and his handshake with Bellamy looked like two predators sizing each other up. "That's our buyer," Emma whispered to Joe, who had positioned himself nearby under the pretense of checking fence posts. "That's him. Makes his money buying research specimens for a lab in Houston. Claims it's for advancing veterinary medicine, but word is they do military contract work, testing chemical agents, experimental surgeries, stress responses, nothing a horse would survive." Emma felt physically ill. She watched as Bellamy led Reynolds toward the main house for refreshments before the demonstration scheduled for 11. Maria caught her eye from the kitchen doorway, making a subtle sign of the cross. The entire staff seemed to understand what was at stake. Emma returned to Phantasma, who sensed her distress immediately. The Mustang's ears flattened briefly, his nostrils flaring as he picked up her accelerated heartbeat, the subtle changes in her scent triggered by fear. "I need you to trust me today more than ever," she told him, stroking his neck in long, steady motions. "No matter what happens, remember everything we've built." Emma spent the next hour preparing Phantasma, not with physical equipment but with emotional reinforcement. She brushed his coat until it gleamed like polished obsidian, all the while speaking softly in the Spanish-English mix that had become their private language. She wove stories of open plains and freedom, of trust and respect, grounding both of them in the connection they'd forged. At precisely 11, Bellamy appeared with Reynolds and a small entourage. Bellamy's smile was too wide, his gestures too expansive, the demeanor of a man closing in on a profitable deal. "And here she is, our miracle worker," Bellamy announced with condescending pride. "Emma, this is Mr. Reynolds. He's very interested in our magnificent Mustang." Reynolds studied Emma with the same calculating gaze he'd given Phantasma from a distance. "So you're the Mexican girl with the horse magic." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Bellamy tells me you've accomplished the impossible with this killer." Emma met his gaze steadily. "Phantasma was never a killer, Mr. Reynolds. Just traumatized and misunderstood." "Phantasma?" Reynolds chuckled, looking to Bellamy. "Your girl's named a $75,000 investment like a pet?" Bellamy laughed along, though his eyes flashed a warning at Emma. "Our little encantadora has her ways. The important thing is that they work." Reynolds approached the enclosure, standing at a safe distance. Phantasma immediately tensed, backing away, eyes fixed on the stranger with unmistakable wariness. Emma realized with sudden clarity that the Mustang could sense Reynolds's true nature, the predatory intent behind the polished veneer. "Magnificent specimen," Reynolds remarked, examining Phantasma like merchandise. "Genetically superior, perfect for our studies." "Studies?" Emma echoed, unable to keep the edge from her voice. Reynolds waved a dismissive hand. "Advanced behavioral research. Nothing for you to worry about, sweetheart." The condescension in his tone made Emma's skin crawl. Bellamy clapped his hands together. "Well, let's see the demonstration. Emma, show Mr. Reynolds what you've accomplished with our investment." Emma entered the enclosure, carrying only her soft rope. Phantasma approached her immediately, positioning himself slightly between her and the observers, as if protecting her from them rather than needing protection himself. "It's okay," she soothed, running her hand along his powerful neck. "Just like we've practiced." Bradley appeared at the fence, holding what looked like a thick blanket. "Here," he said, offering it through the rails. "Since you refuse to use a proper saddle, at least use this for the demonstration." Emma hesitated, studying Bradley's face. His expression was neutral, but something in his eyes made her suspicious. Still, with Reynolds and Bellamy watching, she couldn't refuse without causing a scene. She took the blanket, noting it was heavier than it appeared. As she prepared to place it across Phantasma's back, she ran her hands carefully over the fabric, fingers detecting something hard and pointed sewn into the underside, something that would dig painfully into the horse's back when weight was applied. Emma's eyes shot to Bradley, who was watching with barely concealed anticipation. The sabotage was crude, but effective. If she'd used the blanket, Phantasma would have reacted violently to the sudden pain, confirming his reputation as dangerous and unmanageable. "This isn't the blanket I usually use," Emma said calmly, setting it aside. "Phantasma is sensitive to new textures. I'll work without it today." Bradley's face darkened as his plan unraveled. Emma turned her attention fully to Phantasma, beginning their demonstration with simple, fluid movements that showcased their connection. The Mustang responded to her lightest touch, her softest word, moving with her in perfect synchronization. Reynolds watched with growing interest as Emma demonstrated how Phantasma responded to verbal commands in both English and Spanish, how he would follow her without restraint, how he allowed her to mount and ride with nothing but the soft rope as a guide. "Impressive," Reynolds admitted when Emma concluded the demonstration. "Most horses require far more persuasion." Bellamy beamed, clearly seeing dollar signs. "I told you she had a special touch. Now imagine this performance at your facility." Reynolds nodded thoughtfully, then raised his offer. "I'll add another 50,000 to my previous number. That's over $500,000 for a horse that was considered worthless 3 months ago." Phantasma, still standing beside Emma, tensed at Reynolds' voice. Emma stroked his neck soothingly, though her own heart was racing. $500,000, a sum that would make it nearly impossible for Bellamy to refuse. "We should discuss the details," Reynolds continued, his attention now fully on Bellamy. "There are some specialized transport requirements for my research facility." "Research facility?" Emma interrupted, unable to contain herself. "What kind of research requires live horses?" Reynolds' carefully constructed charm slipped for a moment. "Advanced behavioral studies, stress responses, pharmaceutical testing. Our lab is at the forefront of veterinary science." "You mean vivisection?" Emma said, the word falling like a stone between them. Silence descended over the group. Reynolds' expression hardened into something cold and calculating. "Young lady, you clearly don't understand the importance of scientific advancement. Our procedures are fully approved by the necessary authorities." "Approved doesn't mean humane," Emma countered, standing her ground. Bellamy stepped forward, his smile strained. "Emma, why don't you take Phantasma back to his stall while Mr. Reynolds and I discuss business?" It wasn't a suggestion. As Emma led Phantasma away, she caught sight of Lisa hiding behind the equipment shed, phone pointed in their direction. The girl gave a tiny nod before disappearing. A small spark of hope kindled in Emma's chest. Someone else had witnessed Reynolds' revealing comments. When Emma returned to the main yard after settling Phantasma, she found Bellamy and Reynolds shaking hands, their deal apparently concluded. Reynolds' smile was triumphant as he spotted her approaching. "Good news, my dear," he called out with false joviality. "You'll be seeing your equine friend again soon. Mr. Bellamy has agreed to include your services in our arrangement. A 6-month contract to help Phantasma adjust to his new home." Emma froze, ice spreading through her veins. "I haven't agreed to anything." Bellamy's expression hardened. "It's a generous offer, Emma. 3 times your current salary, housing provided in Houston. Most people would be grateful." "Most people would want to know what happens to Phantasma after those 6 months," she replied. Reynolds waved a dismissive hand. "That's not your concern. Once the animal has served its purpose in our initial studies—" "Initial studies," Emma repeated, her voice rising despite her efforts to remain calm. "What comes after that?" Something in Reynolds' expression shifted, the facade of benevolence cracking to reveal the coldness beneath. "Listen carefully. That horse will be in my facility next week, with or without you. The only question is whether you benefit from the inevitable or become an obstacle to be removed." The threat hung in the air between them, unmistakable in its clarity. Emma fought to keep her expression neutral even as her mind raced through increasingly desperate options. "The transfer papers will be ready on Friday," Bellamy announced, clearly eager to conclude the uncomfortable confrontation. "We'll have the horse prepared for transport by noon." As Reynolds and his entourage prepared to leave, Lisa was discovered filming from behind a stable door. Bellamy's face flushed with anger as he confiscated her phone, ordering a ranch hand to escort her off the property immediately. "This is private business," he snapped, "not some school project." Lisa caught Emma's eye as she was being led away, managing to whisper as they passed, "I saved everything to the cloud, including when Reynolds mentioned vivisection." In that moment, watching Bellamy and Reynolds shake hands with satisfied smiles, Emma knew she had exactly 48 hours to save Phantasma from a fate worse than death. Emma's mind raced as she watched Lisa being escorted off the property, the girl's whispered words echoing in her head. "I saved everything to the cloud, including when Reynolds mentioned vivisection." 48 hours, 2 days to prevent Phantasma from being shipped to a laboratory where he would be reduced to an experiment, a test subject, a specimen. The thought made her physically ill. Night descended over Bellamy Ranch, bringing no peace. Emma paced her tiny room, mentally calculating and recalculating what little time remained. The wall calendar mocked her with its red circle around Friday, Reynolds' return date with transfer documents and a horse trailer. 2 days to prevent the unthinkable. She couldn't sleep. Wouldn't sleep. Not with Phantasma's fate hanging in the balance. At 3 in the morning, Emma slipped out of her quarters and made her way through the silent ranch toward the stables. The night watchman, an older man sympathetic to her situation, pretended not to see her as she passed. Phantasma sensed her approach before she reached his enclosure, his soft nickering a greeting in the darkness. Emma slid the bolt on his gate and entered, sinking down into the clean straw beside him. The great Mustang lowered himself carefully to lie beside her, his breathing deep and steady despite the tension that had filled the ranch all day. "They want to take you away," she whispered, fingers threading through his coarse mane. "To a place where they'll hurt you in the name of science." Her voice caught. "I won't let them, but I don't know how to stop them yet." Phantasma's eyes, reflecting the faint moonlight filtering through the stable windows, held a depth of understanding that still amazed her. He shifted slightly, pressing his warm bulk against her side as if offering comfort rather than seeking it. Dawn broke with Emma still in the stable, having dozed fitfully against Phantasma's side. She needed allies, and quickly. Her first thought was Lisa, whose quick thinking had preserved crucial evidence. But reaching the girl wouldn't be easy. Bellamy had banned her from the property, and Emma's movements were being watched more closely than ever. As Emma completed her morning chores, she noticed a small folded paper tucked beneath her cleaning supplies. Inside was a hastily scrawled phone number and a note in Lisa's handwriting. "My dad's Facebook. Password Caballos 2007. Emma smiled grimly. The clever girl had created a lifeline. During her lunch break, Emma borrowed Maria's ancient smartphone and logged into Jorge Ortega's Facebook account. Lisa had already uploaded carefully edited clips of Reynolds' visit, highlighting his casual mention of stress testing and pharmaceutical trials. The video was starting to gain traction, shared by animal welfare advocates and local community groups concerned about Bellamy's influence in the region. In the kitchen that evening, Maria pulled Emma into the pantry, away from prying ears. "My nephew Miguel is coming for the weekend," she whispered. "He studies law at the University of Texas. Maybe he can help." Hope flickered in Emma's chest. "When does he arrive?" "Tomorrow afternoon. I told him everything." Maria squeezed Emma's hand. "He says there might be legal options based on animal welfare laws." Emma nodded gratefully, though the lawyer in her mind remained skeptical. In Texas, animals were property, pure and simple. The law provided little protection against an owner's right to sell their property to whomever they chose. As she left the kitchen, Bradley blocked her path, his face twisted with malicious satisfaction. "Plotting with the kitchen staff won't save your precious horse, sweetheart. Reynolds is paying top dollar and nothing stops Bellamy when that much money is involved." Emma met his gaze steadily. "Why does it bother you so much that Phantasma trusts me?" Something ugly flashed across Bradley's features. "Because you're nothing, a Mexican cleaning girl playing horse whisperer. You don't deserve success here." The raw honesty of his hatred was almost refreshing after so much hidden agenda. Emma stepped around him without another word, feeling his eyes boring into her back as she walked away. That night, Emma made a decision. Until Reynolds returned with his transport trailer, she would sleep in Phantasma's stall. If they tried to take him in the night, they would have to go through her first. She packed a small bag with essentials and slipped out after dark, settling into the corner of the enclosure with a thin blanket. Phantasma seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. The normally restless Mustang stood guard over her through the night, his ears constantly moving, alert to any approach. For the first time since her arrival at the ranch, their roles had reversed. Now he was protecting her. In the deepest part of the night, when even the coyotes had fallen silent, Emma found herself telling Phantasma things she'd never told another soul. She spoke of her mother's abandonment when she was 5, of growing up in a trailer with a grandmother who loved her fiercely but couldn't shield her from the world's cruelties. She described the taunts at school for being the Mexican girl from the trailer park, the teachers who assumed she couldn't read English properly, the dreams of college that died when Consuelo's health failed. "Everyone left me," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. "But you stayed. You chose to trust when you had every reason not to." Phantasma lowered his massive head, resting it gently in her lap as if absorbing her sorrow. Emma fell asleep with her hand on his neck, feeling his steady pulse beneath her fingers. Morning brought fresh determination. Emma rose before the ranch awakened and went about her duties as if nothing had changed, though Bradley watched her movements with suspicious eyes. She could feel him tracking her, reporting back to Bellamy on her every conversation, her every movement. By midday, word of her nighttime vigil had spread among the staff. Jorge Ortega silently pressed a sandwich into her hand as they passed in the yard. Maria ensured her coffee cup was always full. Joe Parker adjusted the stable duty roster so that no one would disturb her midnight vigil. Small gestures of solidarity from people who had their own families to support, their own jobs to protect. Lisa's video continued gaining traction online. By afternoon, it had been shared by several animal rights organizations, including a regional director of the ASPCA who commented, investigating these troubling allegations regarding experimental use of horses. Bradley, discovering Emma checking the video's progress on Maria's phone, snatched the device from her hands. "Bellamy knows what you're doing," he hissed. "I've been monitoring your little conspiracy. Every call, every whisper." His smile was cold. "Did you really think we wouldn't notice you sleeping in the stables? That we wouldn't check what little Miss Lisa was posting online?" Fear clutched at Emma's throat. "Phantasma doesn't deserve to die in a laboratory." "Phantasma doesn't deserve anything," Bradley sneered. "He's livestock, not a person, and you're just an employee who's forgotten her place." That evening, as dusk painted the Texas sky in shades of flame, Emma found Joe Parker waiting at Phantasma's enclosure. The old foreman's face was grave as he handed her a worn folder. "I've been keeping these for years," he said quietly, glancing around to ensure they weren't observed. Records of horses that died under suspicious circumstances, conditions hidden from inspectors, workers paid below minimum wage, threatened with deportation if they complained. Emma leafed through the damning documents, her eyes widening. "This could destroy Bellamy." Joe nodded solemnly. "It could also destroy me. 20 years of looking the other way, documenting but never speaking up." His weathered face showed the weight of that complicity. "I need this job, Emma. My pension, my health care. At my age, where would I go?" Emma understood the impossible position. Joe had done what he could within the constraints of survival. "Thank you for trusting me with these," she said, carefully securing the folder in her bag. As night fell, Emma once again made her way to Phantasma's enclosure, slipping inside with her meager bedding. The Mustang greeted her with a soft nicker, immediately positioning himself between her and the gate, a guardian stance that brought tears to her eyes. "One more day," she whispered, running her hand along his powerful shoulder. "We'll figure something out, I promise." Hours passed in vigilant silence. Emma dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound. Around 2 a.m, she heard the distinctive crunch of footsteps on gravel. Phantasma was instantly alert, ears pricked forward, muscles tensed beneath his glossy coat. Emma rose silently, moving to the Mustang's side. The footsteps paused outside the stable. Then the door creaked open. Emma held her breath, one hand on Phantasma's neck to steady them both. "Emma?" Maria's voice came in an urgent whisper. "Are you there, mija?" Relief flooded through her. "Here," she called softly. Maria appeared at the enclosure accompanied by a young man with intelligent eyes and Maria's same determined chin. "This is my nephew, Miguel," she introduced. "He came early. We need to talk." Miguel assessed the situation quickly, his law student mind already cataloging facts and possibilities. "Lisa's video has gone viral in certain circles," he explained. "I've been reviewing Texas animal welfare statutes. There might be grounds for a temporary injunction based on the evidence of Reynolds' intended use." Hope flickered in Emma's chest. "Can we stop the sale?" Miguel's expression was cautiously optimistic. "I've contacted a professor who specializes in animal law. We've requested an emergency hearing with Judge Ramirez tomorrow morning at 9. If we can demonstrate that the horse would be subjected to inhumane treatment, we might get a 72-hour hold on the transfer." "Reynolds arrives at noon," Emma reminded him. "Then we'll need a backup plan," Miguel acknowledged. "The legal system has its limits, especially when it comes to animal protection in Texas." They talked late into the night, formulating strategies and contingencies. Miguel took copies of Joe's documents, his eyes widening at the extent of Bellamy's violations. Maria brought coffee and kept watch, her loyalty to Emma now outweighing decades of careful survival at the ranch. By dawn, they had the outlines of both Plan A and Plan B. Miguel would file for the emergency injunction first thing in the morning. Meanwhile, Maria would create a diversion when Reynolds arrived, allowing Emma critical minutes to implement their backup plan if the legal avenue failed. As Miguel and Maria prepared to leave, Lisa appeared at the stable door, breathless from having snuck onto the property through a back fence. "The video hit 50,000 views, she reported excitedly. "And guess who just sent me a message? Alexandra Donovan from the ASPCA. She's driving to Marfa with a legal team." Emma felt a surge of hope, tempered by the reality of their timeline. In the enclosure beside her, Phantasma stood alert, as if understanding the gravity of their planning. His intelligent eyes moved from person to person, ears flicking to catch every word. "Go home and rest," Emma told the others. "Tomorrow will require all our strength." In the pre-dawn darkness, Emma sat with her back against Phantasma's warm side, both of them grabbing what little rest they could. Her phone vibrated with a message from Miguel. "Hearing confirmed with Judge Ramirez. 9 a.m. sharp. But Reynolds could still take possession if the judge denies our motion." Emma reached up to stroke Phantasma's neck, feeling the strong pulse beneath her fingers. "We'll find a way," she promised. "Whatever happens, we face it together." In the madrugada, Emma awakened sobresaltada to the sound of footsteps approaching the stable. When the door opened, she prepared to confront Bradley or some henchman of Bellamy's, but froze in surprise as she saw enter a small group. Joe Parker, Maria Gonzalez, Lisa and Miguel, all carrying flashlights and determination in their eyes, with Miguel announcing, "We've secured an emergency hearing with Judge Ramirez tomorrow at 9, but we need a Plan B in case he denies the injunction, because Reynolds arrives at noon to take Phantasma." The small group huddled in the pre-dawn shadows of the stable, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of flashlights. Emma felt a surge of emotion at the sight of them, people risking their livelihoods, perhaps even their safety for Phantasma. "We don't have much time," Miguel said, spreading a hand-drawn map of the ranch on a hay bale. "If the judge grants our injunction, we'll have legal protection for 72 hours. But if he doesn't..." "We need to be ready to move," Joe finished, his weathered finger tracing a line along the eastern boundary of the property. "This service road hasn't been used in years. Maintenance gates rusted, but the lock's broken." Emma studied the map, memorizing the route while stroking Phantasma's neck. The Mustang stood alert beside her, ears flicking toward each speaker, nostrils flaring to capture their scents. "What about the electric fences?" she asked, remembering the security system Bellamy had installed last year. Joe's eyes crinkled with the hint of a smile. "Funny thing about ranch generators, they can be temperamental, especially if someone accidentally causes a short circuit." Maria nodded approvingly. "And I can create a distraction at the main house. A gas leak in the kitchen would require immediate attention." Lisa, the youngest of their unlikely conspirators, held up her phone. "I'll be ready to live stream everything. The ASPCA contact said documentation is crucial." As the others discussed the timing of their backup plan, Emma leaned against Phantasma, drawing strength from his solid presence. The Mustang lowered his head, pressing his muzzle gently against her shoulder. In the weeks since their first encounter, he had developed an uncanny ability to sense her emotional state, offering comfort when she needed it most. "I'm scared," she admitted in a whisper meant only for him. "Not for me, but for you." Phantasma's dark eyes, once filled with terror and rage, now held something remarkably like determination. He wasn't just passively accepting her protection, he was actively participating in it, his powerful body positioned between her and potential threats, his senses alert to changes in their environment. As the first hints of dawn colored the eastern sky, the group finalized their plans. Miguel would head directly to the courthouse to file their emergency petition. Joe would ensure his accident with the generator coincided precisely with Reynolds' arrival. Maria would create her kitchen emergency, drawing Bellamy and others away from the stables at the critical moment. "What about Bradley?" Emma asked, knowing the head trainer would be watching her closely. "Leave him to me," Joe said grimly. "I've been waiting 20 years to tell that man what I think of his methods." They dispersed as the ranch began stirring to life, each moving casually to their regular positions as if it were any ordinary day. Emma remained with Phantasma, using their morning routine as cover while mentally rehearsing escape routes and contingencies. By 7 o'clock, the ranch was fully awake. Emma led Phantasma through their usual exercises, aware of Bradley watching from the office window, phone in hand. She had no doubt he was reporting her every movement to Bellamy. At 8:30, Miguel texted from the courthouse. "Judge Ramirez reviewing our petition now. Decision expected within the hour." Emma's stomach knotted with tension. She kept her movements fluid and calm, not wanting to telegraph her anxiety to Phantasma, who was already sensing the unusual energy permeating the ranch. The Mustang's ears swiveled constantly, catching snippets of conversation, footsteps approaching and retreating, the unnatural quiet of staff who normally called greetings to each other. At 9:45, Emma's phone vibrated against her hip. Miguel's message was brief and devastating. "Judge delayed decision. Needs more evidence. Reynolds arrives in 2 hours. Implement Plan B." Emma closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. When she opened them, Phantasma was watching her intently, his body already tensing in response to her subtle shift in posture. "We're leaving," she whispered, stroking his neck. "Together." She glanced at her watch. If everything went according to plan, Joe would disable the perimeter security at 11:30. Maria would create her diversion at 11:45. That would give Emma 15 minutes to guide Phantasma to the maintenance gate before Reynolds arrived at noon. The next 2 hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. Emma maintained their routine, brushing Phantasma methodically, checking his hooves, speaking to him in the mix of English and Spanish that had become their private language. To anyone watching, she appeared to be preparing him for another training session. At 11:15, Bradley approached, his expression smug. "Bellamy wants the horse groomed and ready in the main presentation area by 11:50, he announced. "Reynolds is bringing a specialized transport team." Emma nodded, keeping her face neutral despite the panic fluttering in her chest. The main presentation area was at the opposite end of the ranch from their planned escape route. "We'll be ready," she said, buying time. Bradley's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "I'll be back to escort you both personally." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. The moment he left, Emma abandoned all pretense. She quickly secured the soft rope around Phantasma's neck, not a restraint but a connection between them, and led him toward the back of the stable complex, using the buildings for cover. At exactly 11:30, the lights flickered and died. The electric hum of the perimeter fences fell silent. Joe had done his part. Emma and Phantasma moved quickly now, staying close to the tree line that ran along the eastern edge of the property. The Mustang matched her urgency step for step, his powerful body flowing beside hers in perfect synchronization. No longer was he fighting her guidance. They moved as a single unit, communicating through the subtlest shifts in pressure and energy. They were halfway to the maintenance gate when shouting erupted from the main house, Maria's diversion. Emma glanced back to see staff rushing toward the kitchen area, where smoke billowed from an open window. Almost there, she encouraged Phantasma, quickening their pace. The maintenance gate appeared ahead, rusted and neglected just as Joe had described. Emma was reaching for it when a voice cut through the morning air. "Going somewhere?" Bradley stood 20 yards away, a ranch ATV idling behind him. His face was twisted with triumphant malice as he raised a phone to his ear. "Mr. Bellamy, I found them trying to escape through the east gate." Emma's heart sank. Their plan was unraveling before it had truly begun. Bradley approached slowly, a coiled rope in his hand. "Bellamy's on his way with Reynolds. They're both very interested to hear why his valuable investment is being sneaked off the property." Emma positioned herself between Bradley and Phantasma, feeling the Mustang's hot breath on her shoulder as he snorted in recognition of the man who had tried to break him. "He doesn't belong in a laboratory," Emma said, her voice steadier than she felt. "You know what they'll do to him there." "What I know," Bradley replied coldly, "is that you're attempting to steal property worth $500,000. He uncoiled his rope. "Step aside, girl." Emma stood her ground. "No." Bradley's face darkened. He took another step forward, raising the rope like a whip. "Last chance before things get ugly." Phantasma's reaction was immediate and unexpected. Instead of retreating in fear from the man who had once terrorized him, the Mustang stepped forward, placing his massive body between Emma and Bradley. His ears lay flat against his head, his teeth bared in unmistakable warning. Bradley faltered, momentarily shocked by the protective display. "Control your animal," he demanded, his confidence wavering. "He's not my animal," Emma replied. "He's making his own choice." The standoff might have continued indefinitely if not for the sound of an approaching engine. Bradley smiled coldly. "Here comes the boss, and your little rebellion ends now." But it wasn't Bellamy's truck that rounded the corner. Instead, a dusty sedan pulled up, and Lisa jumped out, followed by a professional-looking woman in her 40s carrying a leather briefcase. "Emma!" Lisa called. "This is Alexandra Donovan from the ASPCA. She brought a legal team." Bradley's face contorted with rage. "This is private property. You're trespassing." Alexandra approached calmly, unintimidated. "Actually, we have a court order signed by Judge Ramirez 15 minutes ago, granting temporary custody of the Mustang to the ASPCA pending investigation of alleged animal welfare violations." She handed a document to the speechless Bradley. "Furthermore, we have evidence of your employer's knowledge of illegal animal experimentation." As Bradley stared at the court order, more vehicles appeared. Miguel's car, followed by a small news van from the local station. The story Lisa had shared online had caught more attention than anyone had anticipated. "You planned this," Bradley accused Emma, his face pale with fury. "We protected an innocent life," she corrected him. The sound of tires on gravel announced another arrival. Bellamy's truck skidded to a stop, Reynolds in the passenger seat. Both men emerged, faces dark with anger. "What the hell is going on here?" Bellamy demanded, striding toward them. Alexandra stepped forward, introducing herself and presenting a duplicate of the court order. "Your Mustang will remain under ASPCA protection for 72 hours while we investigate claims regarding Mr. Reynolds' intended use of the animal." Reynolds' face flushed dark red. "This is outrageous. I have a legitimate research facility." Conducting vivisection experiments, Lisa interjected, holding up her phone. We have you on video discussing stress testing and experimental procedures. The confrontation escalated, with Bellamy threatening lawsuits and Reynolds denying impropriety. Throughout it all, Emma remained beside Phantasma, one hand resting on his neck, feeling the steady rhythm of his pulse beneath her fingers. The Mustang stood calmly beside her, no longer reacting with fear to the raised voices and tense energy surrounding them. "It's okay," she murmured in Spanish. "They can't take you now." As the legal teams continued their heated debate, Joe Parker approached Emma quietly. "The news van wasn't part of our plan," he said, nodding toward the reporter setting up a camera. "Seems your story's getting bigger than Marfa." Emma watched as Lisa was interviewed, the girl gesturing passionately as she explained the connection between Emma and Phantasma. Other ranch workers had begun to gather, witnessing the confrontation, some nodding in support of Emma's stand. In the midst of the chaos, Phantasma remained an island of calm. His eyes focused on Emma as if she were the only constant in a world of uncertainty. When she leaned against his powerful shoulder, he shifted his weight to support her, a gesture of partnership that brought tears to her eyes. The morning that had begun with desperate escape plans had transformed into something none of them had anticipated, a public stand against exploitation that went beyond one horse and one woman. As cameras recorded and legal documents changed hands, Emma realized that what had started as her private battle had become a community's cause. When Emma finally dismounted, the silence in the ranch was palpable, until Bradley Quebralo with a forced laugh. "Beginner's luck. Anyone can ride a horse in a controlled enclosure." But his voice trembled with envy when Bellamy, with a predatory gleam in his eyes, announced, "Start preparing him for the San Antonio Rodeo in 3 months. We're going to show Texas what an unbreakable Mustang is worth in the right hands, in my hands." Emma's return to Marfa felt like a triumph and a risk simultaneously. The small convoy, Alexandra Donovan's ASPCA vehicle leading, followed by Maria's ancient pickup with Emma and Miguel inside, and Lisa's father's truck bringing up the rear, created an unexpected procession through the dusty streets of the town. Word had spread quickly. Lisa's viral video and the dramatic confrontation at Bellamy Ranch had transformed a private struggle into a public spectacle. Residents stepped onto their porches, some waving in support, others watching with wary curiosity. Behind Maria's truck, a borrowed horse trailer carried Phantasma, temporarily protected by Judge Ramirez's 72-hour injunction. Emma glanced back frequently, her heart racing whenever the trailer swayed on the uneven road. Phantasma had loaded surprisingly well, seeming to understand that Emma's tense energy signaled not danger, but urgency. He'd followed her into the unfamiliar space with only minimal hesitation, his trust in her overriding his instinctive caution. "Where are we taking him?" Emma asked, turning to Miguel in the back seat. "Pastor Jimenez offered his church's old stable," Maria answered, her hands tight on the steering wheel. "It's not much, but it's safe for now." The Methodist church on the edge of town had once kept horses for community programs before budget cuts had forced them to downsize. The small stable stood empty now, its weathered wood testament to decades of West Texas sun and wind. As they pulled up to the modest building, Emma was surprised to see a dozen people already waiting, mostly members of Marfa's Mexican-American community, faces she recognized from quinceañeras and church events during her childhood. "La chica de los caballos," an older woman murmured as Emma stepped out of the truck. "We saw the video. That animal chose you." Pastor Jimenez approached, his lined face solemn but kind. "My congregation heard what happened. We want to help." Emma felt tears threatening as the group efficiently organized themselves, some preparing the stable, others unloading water buckets and hay that had mysteriously appeared in the church parking lot. Community that had always existed in the margins was now rallying visibly, publicly. Alexandra Donovan joined Emma as she prepared to unload Phantasma. "The injunction buys us time, but Bellamy has already filed a counter-motion," she explained quietly. "He's claiming theft of property and defamation. Reynolds has powerful friends in Austin." "What are our chances?" Emma asked, her hand on the trailer latch. Alexandra's professional demeanor softened slightly. Legally. Challenging. Texas property laws strongly favor owners, but public opinion is turning in our favor. The video has over 100,000 views now. Inside the trailer, Phantasma stood alert but calm, his intelligent eyes fixing on Emma the moment she appeared. Unlike his first trailer journey to Bellamy Ranch, he showed no signs of panic, just watchful assessment of his situation. When Emma extended her hand, he stepped forward to touch his muzzle to her palm, a greeting between equals. The unloading drew a small crowd. Children pressed against the fence, whispering excitedly as the magnificent black Mustang emerged, his coat gleaming in the afternoon sun. Phantasma hesitated at the top of the ramp, nostrils flaring as he processed the unfamiliar scents and sounds. Emma remained beside him, not pulling or pushing, simply offering her presence as anchor in this new environment. "It's safe here," she murmured in Spanish, the language she reserved for their most intimate communications. "These people want to help us." After a long moment of consideration, Phantasma descended the ramp with deliberate steps, his body language cautious but not fearful. The crowd's collective intake of breath at his magnificent presence made him pause again, ears flicking forward. "He's even more beautiful than in the video," Pastor Jimenez said softly. The stable was modest but clean, freshly bedded with sweet-smelling hay. As Emma settled Phantasma in, Miguel organized a meeting in the church's small community room. The stakes were high. They had 72 hours before the injunction expired, requiring them to either return Phantasma to Bellamy or secure a more permanent legal protection. "Judge Ramirez is fair," Miguel explained to the assembled group, "but he's bound by Texas law. We need to build a stronger case before our full hearing." Alexandra laid out their legal strategy while Lisa monitored social media, where Sarx-free Phantasma had begun trending regionally. The community members offered what they could: statements about Bellamy's business practices, recollections of mistreated animals, stories of workers exploited, then discarded. "He took my father's land for a fraction of its value," an elderly man recounted bitterly. "Threatened to report him to immigration if he didn't sell. My son worked there one summer," added a woman. "Came home with scars from a training accident they refused to document." Each story built a pattern, not just of animal mistreatment, but of systematic exploitation that Bellamy had perfected over decades. Emma listened, realizing that her fight for Phantasma had tapped into a deeper well of accumulated injustice. As night fell, Emma returned to the stable. Phantasma greeted her with a soft nicker, seemingly relaxed in his temporary home. She spread her sleeping bag in the corner of his stall, unwilling to leave him alone in a strange place. "We've started something bigger than us," she told him, settling against the wall. Phantasma moved to stand near her, his large body providing warmth against the evening chill. His presence felt protective, as if their roles had subtly reversed. No longer was she just his defender, they now protected each other. Morning brought unexpected visitors. Richard Bellamy's black truck pulled up to the church, drawing immediate attention. Emma, alerted by Lisa's frantic text, hurried from the stable to find Bellamy standing in the church parking lot, impeccably dressed and smiling with rehearsed charm. Beside him stood a team of lawyers carrying leather portfolios and expressions of professional detachment. Pastor Jimenez and Alexandra met them at the church steps, forming a physical barrier that Bellamy could not cross without appearing aggressive. "Mr. Bellamy," Alexandra greeted coolly, "the injunction remains in effect. You have no right to approach the animal." Bellamy's smile never wavered. "I'm not here to violate any court orders, Ms. Donovan. I'm here with a proposition." He turned to Emma, who had joined the small group. "For you, Emma." He gestured to one of his lawyers, who opened a portfolio to reveal an official-looking contract. "I'm offering you a position as head trainer at Bellamy Ranch, with a salary 5 times your current rate plus performance bonuses. You'll have complete authority over the Mustang's training program, within reasonable parameters, of course." Emma's suspicion must have shown on her face, because Bellamy continued smoothly, "I recognize your special connection with the animal. It would be foolish of me to ignore its commercial potential. We can work together, Emma. Think of what you could accomplish with proper resources. The offer was designed to be irresistible. Financial security, professional recognition, continued access to Phantasma. For someone who had grown up in a trailer on the outskirts of town, who had cleaned toilets and scrubbed floors, the promised salary alone represented a transformation of circumstances. You'd need to follow some adjustments to maximize his competitive potential, Bellamy added, his smile calculating. My investment needs to perform as advertised, but those are details we can work out. Emma studied Bellamy's face, the practiced sincerity, the cold assessment behind his eyes. You still don't understand, she said quietly. This isn't about money. It never was. Bellamy's facade cracked slightly, irritation flickering across his features. Don't be foolish, girl. Everyone has a price. Name yours. Phantasma isn't a product to be sold, Emma replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. He has feelings, memories, traumas. You don't see that because you only see his value in dollars. This sentimentality is absurd, snapped one of the lawyers. The horse is legally Mr. Bellamy's property. This offer is remarkably generous given the circumstances. The confrontation might have escalated further if not for the arrival of Franklin Reynolds, whose gleaming SUV pulled into the church parking lot with an aggressive roar. The mood shifted instantly from tense negotiation to something more volatile as Reynolds approached, his face flushed with anger. I've already paid for that horse, he barked, not bothering with pleasantries. I have contracts, Bellamy. You promised delivery. Bellamy's smooth demeanor faltered slightly at this public challenge. A temporary delay, Franklin. Legal technicalities that we're resolving quickly. Reynolds turned his attention to Emma, his expression hardening. Look here, girl. I've paid good money for that animal. He is my property now. Maybe on paper, Emma replied evenly, but not in his heart. Reynolds's face darkened with rage. He stepped toward Emma aggressively, causing Pastor Jimenez and Miguel to move protectively closer. You insolent little... The sound of hoofbeats interrupted the confrontation. Everyone turned to see Phantasma, who had somehow opened his stall door, trotting purposefully across the church grounds toward them. The Mustang moved with deliberate calm, no hint of panic or aggression in his bearing. Emma felt her breath catch as Phantasma approached, expecting him to shy away from the group of agitated humans. Instead, he walked directly to her side, positioning himself between her and Reynolds in a gesture of protection that needed no interpretation. The silence that fell over the group was profound. Phantasma stood tall, his breathing steady, his intelligent eyes moving from Reynolds to Bellamy and back to Emma. There was no aggression in his posture, only resolute determination. That's remarkable, murmured one of Bellamy's lawyers, breaking the silence. Reynolds recovered first, his businessman's instincts overriding his momentary shock. Enough theatrics. I've paid for this animal, and I intend to take possession as contracted. He reached into his jacket, producing a checkbook. I'll double my original offer, Bellamy. Let's end this circus now. Lisa, who had been quietly filming the entire encounter, caught Reynolds' next words clearly on video. My research facility has deadlines. The military contract specifically requires equine subjects with his stress response profile. Alexandra stepped forward immediately. Did you say military contract for research subjects? Reynolds realized his error too late. That's proprietary information. He backpedaled, but the damage was done. The confrontation dissolved into legal threats and counter-threats, with Reynolds departing in fury and Bellamy attempting to salvage his position. Through it all, Phantasma remained at Emma's side, a living testament to the connection they had forged. That evening, as news of the confrontation spread through Marfa and across social media, Emma sat with Phantasma under the stars, his large body providing warmth against the desert night's chill. You chose, she whispered, stroking his powerful neck. They all saw you choose. The Mustang's response was to lower his head, resting it gently on her shoulder in a gesture that spoke of trust and protection. In that moment, Emma understood that regardless of legal documents and property claims, some bonds transcended human systems of ownership. Whether the courts recognized it or not, Phantasma had declared his own agency in a way no one present could deny. The courthouse in Marfa had never seen such a crowd. On the morning of the final hearing, people lined up outside the modest building 2 hours before the proceedings were scheduled to begin. The division was clear. On one side stood workers, mostly Latino, dressed in their Sunday best. On the other, wealthy ranchers in expensive boots and custom hats, aligned with Bellamy's interests. Between them, news crews set up cameras, drawn by the story that had captured attention far beyond Texas. Inside the packed courtroom, Emma sat beside Miguel and Alexandra, trying to focus on their whispered last-minute strategy. Her mind kept drifting to Phantasma, now secured in a temporary paddock behind the courthouse, where he could be presented as evidence if needed. She'd spent the dawn hours with him, drawing strength from his steady presence, his intelligent eyes that somehow understood the gravity of this day. "Remember," Alexandra murmured, "Judge Ramirez is fair, but traditional. We need to appeal to both his sense of justice and his respect for legal precedent." Miguel nodded, nervously adjusting his tie. Despite his youth, he carried himself with the determination of someone fighting for more than a single case. The documentation from Joe Parker spans 20 years. It establishes a pattern that can't be dismissed as isolated incidents. When Judge Ramirez entered, a serious man with silver-streaked hair and the weathered complexion of someone who understood both the law and the land, the courtroom fell silent. Emma studied his face, searching for clues to his predisposition, but his expression remained professionally neutral as he called the court to order. "This is a rather unusual case," he began, looking over his reading glasses at the assembled parties. "Ownership disputes typically don't generate quite this level of public interest." Bellamy's lead attorney, a sharp-featured woman from an Austin firm, rose first. "Your Honor, this case is straightforward despite the emotional theatrics surrounding it. My client purchased this animal legally, invested significant resources in its care, and now faces unlawful interference with his property rights," she continued, laying out Bellamy's position with precise legal language. "Horses were property in Texas, had been since the state's founding. Emotional attachment did not override ownership documents. The injunction had been granted on insufficient grounds and should be immediately dissolved, with the Mustang returned to Bellamy Ranch forthwith." Throughout her presentation, Emma noticed how the attorney referred to Phantasma only as the horse or the animal, never acknowledging his individuality, his capacity for choice, his demonstrated sentience. When Miguel rose to present their case, Emma held her breath. Despite his preparation, he remained a student, facing off against experienced corporate lawyers. "Your Honor," Miguel began, his voice initially soft but steadying as he continued, "this case may appear to be about property on the surface, but at its heart, it asks a more profound question. Can we treat a sentient being as mere property when there is clear evidence of emotional capacity, memory, and the ability to form bonds?" He proceeded methodically, presenting Joe Parker's documented evidence of systematic abuse at Bellamy Ranch, Reynolds's captured statements about research protocols, and, most compelling, the video footage of Phantasma deliberately choosing to protect Emma, moving between her and perceived threats without direction or command. "This isn't about transferring ownership from Mr. Bellamy to Ms. Ramirez," Miguel explained. "It's about recognizing that in extraordinary cases, our legal system must evolve to acknowledge relationships that transcend traditional property definitions." Judge Ramirez listened intently, occasionally asking pointed questions that revealed neither bias nor inclination. When Alexandra presented ASPCA precedents from other jurisdictions, he made careful notes but offered no hint of his thinking. The momentum shifted dramatically when Bradley Thompson was called to testify. Emma was shocked to see him enter the courtroom with his arm in a sling, escorted by a sheriff's deputy. "Mr. Thompson," Alexandra began after he was sworn in, "could you explain to the court how you sustained that injury?" Bradley shifted uncomfortably. "I was following Mr. Bellamy's instructions to secure the horse for transport to Reynolds' facility, regardless of the injunction. The animal attacked me when I entered its stall." A murmur ran through the courtroom. "And why would you violate a court order?" Judge Ramirez asked directly. Bradley hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Because Mr. Reynolds was paying 3 times the horse's purchase price, with a bonus for quick delivery before certain paperwork could be processed. What kind of paperwork? Alexandra pressed. Inspection certificates. Reynolds' facility isn't properly licensed for the procedures they perform. They needed the horse before a scheduled state inspection. Bradley looked directly at Bellamy. I've worked for Mr. Bellamy for 12 years. This isn't the first time he sold animals knowing they were destined for unlicensed research. Bellamy half rose from his seat, face flushed with anger, before his attorney frantically pulled him back down. Bradley continued, his testimony revealing a pattern of fraudulent insurance claims on accidentally injured horses and cooperation with Reynolds' facility to supply animals for experiments that circumvented legal oversight. Why are you telling us this now? Judge Ramirez asked. Bradley's expression hardened. Because that horse outsmarted me. I went in thinking I was dealing with a dumb animal, and instead, he shook his head. He didn't attack to hurt me. He could have killed me easily. He just wanted to escape, and he took my shirt sleeve as a message. I've worked with horses all my life, and I've never seen anything like it. Joe Parker's testimony followed, his quiet dignity lending weight to each carefully chosen word. In 40 years working with horses, I've never witnessed a connection like the one between Emma and Phantasma. What they have isn't training or dominance. It's a partnership based on choice. The courtroom fell silent when Joe described how Phantasma had changed under Emma's care, evolving from a traumatized, violent animal into one capable of trust, judgment, and emotional attachment. Most trainers break a horse's spirit to get compliance, Joe explained. Emma did the opposite. She helped this Mustang heal his spirit, and in return, he chose to trust her. That's not something you can own. As the testimonies continued, Emma felt the weight of possibility and loss pressing equally on her shoulders. Legal arguments swirled around core questions of property, rights, and the definition of sentience itself. Through it all, she remained acutely aware of Phantasma waiting outside, his future hanging on human deliberations he couldn't understand. The decisive moment came when Lisa presented her video compilation, not just of the confrontation at the church, but weeks of footage documenting the evolving relationship between Emma and Phantasma. The courtroom watched in silence as the story unfolded on screen. The initial terror, the gradual building of trust. The moment Phantasma first allowed Emma to touch him, their synchronized movements that required no physical control. Judge Ramirez studied the footage intently, particularly the scenes showing Phantasma making clear choices, approaching when he could have fled, protecting when he could have hidden, trusting when experience had taught him to fear. After 4 hours of testimony, Judge Ramirez called a brief recess to consider his ruling. Emma slipped outside to check on Phantasma, finding him alert but calm in his temporary enclosure. He nickered softly when he saw her, stretching his neck over the fence to touch his muzzle to her shoulder. "Whatever happens," she whispered, pressing her forehead against his, "you changed me forever." When court reconvened, Judge Ramirez's expression gave nothing away as he adjusted his glasses and looked out over the packed room. "This court has been presented with an unusual case," he began. "On one hand, Texas law is clear regarding livestock as property. On the other, we have compelling evidence of a relationship that challenges our traditional legal frameworks." He paused, looking directly at Emma. "Ms. Ramirez, your connection with this animal is extraordinary. That much is undeniable, regardless of legal considerations." Emma held her breath as the judge continued. "In cases where existing law fails to address novel situations, courts must sometimes evolve in their interpretation. The evidence presented today demonstrates that this Mustang, Phantasma, has exhibited capacity for choice, memory, and emotional bonding that transcends our typical understanding of livestock." Bellamy's attorney began to object, but Judge Ramirez raised his hand. "I am not creating new law here. I am applying existing principles of animal welfare to an extraordinary circumstance, as is my judicial prerogative." His ruling, when it came, stunned the courtroom. Phantasma could not be returned to either Bellamy Ranch or sold to Reynolds' facility. Instead, Custody would be granted to a newly established trust for his care and protection, with Emma designated as his primary caretaker and the ASPCA providing oversight. This ruling acknowledges both the legal complexity of property rights and the ethical imperative to recognize demonstrated sentience, Judge Ramirez concluded. In extraordinary cases, the law must evolve to recognize extraordinary relationships. The courtroom erupted, supporters embracing while Bellamy's team huddled in grim consultation. Reynolds stormed out, already on his phone. Emma sat motionless, tears streaming down her face as the reality settled in. They had won. Phantasma was safe. 6 months later, on a bright spring morning, Emma stood at the entrance to the newly constructed Phantasma Sanctuary, watching as local children gathered for their weekly session with the rescued horses. The modest facility, built on reclaimed community land with help from volunteers and donations, had become a haven for traumatized horses and marginalized children alike. Joe Parker, now retired from Bellamy Ranch after testifying against his former employer, supervised the construction of a new stable with the expertise of his decades in the field. "You taught me that even at 70, an old dog can learn new tricks," he told Emma, as they worked side by side. In the main paddock, Phantasma grazed peacefully alongside 2 other rescued Mustangs. Unlike the others, he wore no halter, no identifying markers. His freedom symbolized in the absence of human restraints. Yet each morning he chose to approach the fence when Emma arrived, greeting her with the soft nicker that had become his signature welcome. Lisa, now a freshman journalism student, documented the sanctuary's development for her widely followed blog. "What happens here isn't mystical or supernatural," she wrote. "It's profoundly natural. A reconnection with something we've lost in our society, obsessed with control and power." Emma developed a program specifically for children from the marginalized communities surrounding Marfa. Many of them children of Mexican-American farm workers, others from families struggling with poverty or instability. With Phantasma's help, she taught them not just about horses, but about patience, respect, and the subtle language of trust. "Horses are mirrors of our souls," she explained to a group of wide-eyed children gathered around her. "They don't respond to what we say, but to what we are. If there's fear inside us, they sense fear. If there's confidence, they feel confidence." On a special afternoon, as the Texas sun painted the horizon in fiery oranges and purples, Emma rode Phantasma without any equipment, no saddle, no bridle, nothing that symbolized control. Together they galloped across the open field, 2 free spirits moving as one. Miguel, now a newly graduated lawyer specializing in animal rights, watched from the fence line, his expression filled with admiration. "You've changed more than one horse's life, Emma. You've reminded us of something essential." Emma smiled, her eyes reflecting the same brightness visible in Phantasma's gaze. That we all deserve to be seen for who we truly are, not what others want us to be. As the sun set over Phantasma's sanctuary, Emma embraced the Mustang's powerful neck, burying her face in his mane. "We're free together," she whispered. "And that's the greatest lesson of faith I could ever learn."